Hello and welcome to our next session of Communication Research Methods. I am Parvez Khan, Assistant Professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Guwahati University of Science and Technology. The topic is Methods of Textual Analysis, and it's part two of our semiotics, which we have continued. And today we'll be focusing on semiotics and allied concepts. So, what is the objectives of this session? Students will be able to further explore different concepts in semiotics. It will enhance their capacity to understand icon, index, symbol, connotation, denotation, and its application and analysis. And it will help build students' insight in approaching media and cultural text. So, this is what we are going to do and focus on today. And let's once again begin with a very basic understanding of what semiotics is, and then obviously we'll be talking about our today's session. So, semiotics, as we have discussed already, is also called semiology. It's a study of signs and sign using behavior, and it was defined by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, and basically focuses on the life of signs within society. So let's once again move towards the basic concept of sign. What is a sign? How it works? What does it consist of? So as you remember, that sign is basically something that consists of signifier and signified. We've already discussed this in detail, what it means, what they are, how it works. So basically, we are going to work more on another concept today, and we've already discussed the three types of signs, which is the iconic signs, basically, which are something based on similarity of the appearance. For example, if you see a photograph and if it resembles you, it is iconic sign. Then we have indexical sign, basically, which reflects upon cause and effect. For example, if you see a sign of smoke, basically that reflects danger, and that's how it's an indexical sign, cause and effect relationship. And then we have the symbolic signs. What is a symbolic sign? Obviously, when you see a cross or when you see a word or a symbol, what does it reflect? So that's what it is. The three signs are iconic signs, indexical signs, and symbolic signs. We've already discussed that, but let's go further today. That what does it signify? For example, icons. If you look at icons, it is signified by resemblance. For example, if you see a photograph and if it resembles someone's face, that is an icon. Similarly, if you see fire and smoke somewhere, so you can obviously consider it as an index because it's a cause and effect relationship. And then if you look at the third one, symbols. In symbols, you can how you can recognize symbols. It's recognized through conventions. And like for example, if we talk about cross, so you cannot give meaning to a cross. It's by conventions over a period of centuries that people have given that meaning to a cross of as a symbolic sign of Christianity. So when you look at icons, you can clearly see what it is. When you see at indexes, you can figure out what it is. But when you look at symbols, you must learn about it. What does it mean? So semiotics basically helps us understand how people find meanings in things. This is the important key point. The purpose of semiotics is basically to give us some meaning, make us understand how people find meaning in things. Now, semiotics can be used to analyze how meanings are generated in advertisement, television, photograph, or film. That's very important, and that's why semiotics is very relevant to the field of journalism and mass communication. Now let's look at example. I've given this example in my previous session as well, but it's again always good to give this example because it will give you clarity. For example, there's a word called cool. If we take the example of cool as a signifier, the word cool can mean that it is referring to temperature. If you say that weather is very cold today or it's a cool weather today, it means it's reflecting to something that's colder. But if you say that someone is wearing stylish dress, that you're wearing a cool dress, it reflects to something that is popular. So the relationship between signifier and signified can change over a period of time and in different contexts. So let's come back to our today's session. And if you can write down the meanings of these things, I'm giving you a few words to write down: home, house, residence, or dwelling. What does it all mean? why I'm giving this word. Now, if you look carefully, all of these words almost are similar. The word home, house, residence, and dwelling all have the same basic definition, but the meaning of each word is different. When you read this word, it looks like same, but when you think about it, it has a different meaning. Now, what is the definition of home, house, residence, and dwelling? That's important to look at. And where a person lives at any given time, what is the meaning of house. So, even though these four words have the same denotation, dictionary definition, uh, they have different meanings. Dictionary meaning can be the same, basically, but when you think about it in your mind, it has a different connotation. So, denotation and connotation is the concept today that we're going to talk about in detail, further detail after this. And let's see, let's move on towards our next slide. So, connotation is something, connotations about this picture can be home, can be cozy, living, comfortable place. So, whenever you think about home, it's like a cozy place, a loving place, a comfortable place where people live, families live. It's like a beautiful image in the mind. When you think about a house, it's basically a building. So when you talk to someone that you have a one canal house, it's like something that it brings to the mind about structure of the house. And then when you talk that about the residence, that my residence is in Kohat or KDA or Hayatabad or whatever, it doesn't give you the feeling of coziness or comfortableness. It's just about, it has no feeling, but it just tells you that it's a residence where people live. And then obviously when you talk about dwelling, it's a primitive surrounding. It's like it can be anything, be just general surroundings. So all of these words have different imaginative meanings when you think about it. But the most beautiful word is home. Let's make it our home. When you hear someone say let's make it our home, it means that they want to give the place their own importance. When you say that let's make this place our home, it means that you have a love for it. You're comfortable living in it. So that's what matters when the connotations come. But then again, let's look at the slide. Connotation is basically the emotional, cultural, and imaginative meaning or association surrounding a word. And a connotation of a word can either have a positive or a negative effect. So, and on the other hand, denotation is basically the literal meaning of the word. Like when you see a kite, you just know it's a kite. You just don't think about it. It's like the literal meaning. What does the literal meaning mean? Like how you take it. When you see a laptop, you just read the word laptop. But when you think about its function, that's connotation. So denotation is basically the literal meaning. So now denotation is the actual definition of a word. It's what you would read when you look up the word in dictionary. And connotation is basically it's what we think about when we hear a word. It's like we have a feeling when we hear it or read it. For example, does it make us happy? Does it make us sad? Does it make us excited? So the kind of feelings that come with a word is basically connotation. So let me give you an example that if it's a denotation, if you read a word low in cost, that is just low in cost, simple as that. But when you start imagining what low in cost means, it can mean that it's a poorly made thing, made with inferior ingredients or products or something which is inferior in nature. So your connotation can think that if a thing is cheaper, it may not be of a very good quality. So that is what your denotation and connotation can be about. Now, let's talk about another sentence which is very important to see, look and to consider. For example, we want to put something into something else, we can call it either investing or gambling. Now, both these words, like I'm gambling, it will be a gamble for me to invest in such a risky market, or I'm investing, it's like a gamble for me if I'm just going to purchase these share accounts. Or on the other hand, when you say I'm investing in these share accounts, both have different connotative meaning. Now, it's for you to decide which one is a positive word, which one is a negative word. So the words you choose also have a lot to do with connotation and denotation. When you use a positive word such as investing, it means it's used in a positive sense. When you talk about gambling, suddenly you think that it's something riskier, something where you have chances to lose money, or maybe you can go big and just score a home run and just get benefit. But that's what comes with gambling. So the words have positive and negative kinds of access to it. So you can just look into that as well. And then we can look into, let's just wait. Let's just move on towards our next slide. I think it's just taking a bit of time. Yes. So now let's just look into the picture that I'm going to share. It's a very important, the Paris March magazine, which was basically analyzed by Roland Barthes. This was a very famous discussion of denotation and connotation. So we've already discussed what it means. Now we have to apply it here in practical terms to make you understand what the basic meanings are, how you can utilize it to your analysis. So when I was reading somewhere that Roland Barthes was went to a barber shop where he picked up a magazine, and he saw that picture. So when you look at the picture, it just tells you that a young African boy is basically saluting to a French flag, and this is a French magazine, so he's basically saluting to that. At denotative level, it just shows that this boy is saluting and is happy, saluting to the French flag. But when you dig deeper, and particularly when you just analyze deep racism, colonialism, and all these perspectives, when you're aware of it, how it works, so you can think about it that whether it works properly or not. So let's go to this slide. It just, what does it signify? The picture just I showed you, different colors and shades and pink on the paper, and then it's a young black man holding his hand near his face. And when you look at sign and signifier, it's again young black male salutes a French flag, and it basically signified French and military connotations. But when you talk about Barthes myths and proper connotation, it's basically an African people are okay with being colonized by us good French guys. It shows that the colonists have made this picture to tell people of Africa that we are taking care of you. And because they are saluting to our military and to our flag, it means that they are with us. But deep down, it shows racism, it shows colonialism, it shows how French imperialism was taking place back then when they had control of African regions. So, this is how images you can analyze. Like, for example, if you see an image where people are shown happy, saluting something, or if people are shown happy, like, for example, I was reading an article where the refugees were being thrown out of their homes. The elderly people were also being thrown out of their homes, but there was no picture of elderly people. What they did, they took picture of young men carrying their bags. It didn't have that impact in the press. People thought, okay, these are some people, they will be removed from here. So there was no actual sympathy for them. Now the story would have been very different if the pictures of old people, if the children or people in misery were shown in the press. So that tells you what you are showing in the press or media has a lot of impact. The way you show it has a lot of impact. The words you choose have a lot of impact. So this is all about press. Now this is what brings into the significance of semiotics, because what I'm trying to do here is by showing you the image of a black young boy saluting a French flag is just a simple picture. But deep down, it shows racism, it shows how colonial powers are ruling, and it is just misleading people that these Africans are happy under a French colonial rule. So, this is an important point. Whenever you see images in the press, whether it's an advertisement of skin whitening cream, you can look into details. What does it reflect? What is it countering? Why do you have to be white? Because you want to be accepted in the general audience of people? Or is it okay to be black? Is it okay to celebrate whatever you are? So these kind of things, when you do study particularly related to race, ethnic identity, media representations, semiotics can be very helpful. And this is why semiotics is an amazing way of analyzing cultural and media texts. So what semiotic does is semiotics treats objects, images, and practices as texts to be read. It's very important that whenever you're doing, semiotics can be applied to even objects, images, practices, and the text that's available. You can analyze films, you can analyze advertisement, you can analyze an object, a statue. Even if you look at a statue, whose statue is it? Why is it placed here? Does it have any cultural significance? Is it promoting the colonialism, colonial past, or is it about the resistance that we had in back then against the imperial powers? So, what does the object tries to tell you? That's what semiotics is all about. So, the question is not what I'm seeing, but what does it mean? That's semiotics. Because the important point in semiotics is that you're focusing more on what I'm seeing, not what I'm seeing, but what does it mean. The literal meaning and the connotative meaning, it can be different. You can see, you can take word for whatever it is, but then obviously looking at words, objects with context is something that makes this analysis more important in media and cultural studies. So continuing with this, let's significance of semiotics is also that it can cover pictures, fashion, clothing, photographs, advertisement, furniture, household item, toys, films, cartoons, virtual imagery, and then treat them as text to be read and decoded. Now it reads everything else as text. Whatever you see, whenever you watch a film, you can read a film as a text. And then you can decode it, you can apply your analysis to it, you can explain it based on the concept of sign, signifier, signified, or icon, or connotation, or denotation, whatever you find feasible enough. And through these, you can just go out and make your actual analysis for film studies, media representation studies, media representation, or whatever you want, you can analyze it through semiotics. So, the important thing is language, and language has a key significance in the semiotics. So, language is a shared system. It is only because we know and agree about the rules and codes that we can communicate. Now, because there are cultural codes, because of these cultural codes, we are able to communicate because we have assigned a value or meaning to things. So, if you just take out the value or meanings outside, even the language won't be workable. So, through conventions, through period of time, through discussions, or what you can say traditions, you come finally give and assign values to the words. So the production of meaning is dependent on the sign. Sign is very important again, and the idea of the sign can be extended from the written or spoken word to images, objects, activities, and even events in the everyday world. Now, again, now let's not just simplify semiotics to a basic sign or just something that's a written word. It can be applied to images, objects, activities, events in the everyday world. So that's a very important point. Whenever you analyze, just don't simplify semiotics. So every object in the world can pass from a closed, silent existence to an oral state open to appropriation by society. This is what Roland Barthes has shared in a very famous essay, Myth Today in Mythologies, that every object in the world can pass from a closed, silent existence to an oral state open to appropriation by society. And this means that every object that you see is open to appropriation by society. Society can change the meaning of it. Any word, for example, there's a word Taliban was used differently in Afghan war, and Taliban is now used differently post 9/11 circumstances. This means that every word, object, discussion can change with a period of time. Embedded journalism was a very dangerous word. Sorry, it's very difficult. Embedded journalism was a different word. It had a different context back then in in the Gulf War in the 1990s, and now it has a different meaning. Now, it's sometimes it's considered unethical as well because you're just promoting the military version of things. So the thing is that words can change, the meanings can change, and society can appropriate meaning over a period of time. So that's important to look into as semioticians. When you become semioticians, you also have to look into things into cultural context, how society is appropriating these things. So yes, again, every object is open to appropriation. Now, example. Now, look at this picture. What does it's a very simple example that I'm going to share today. It's about a Barbie doll. We all know that this is a famous doll that girls around the young girls, small kids around the world, they have it. They have their house. They have this doll. It's famous, but again, it's a very commercially successful project as well. It's, Barbie is famous all around the world. And what does it reflect? What does it indicate? So we're going to talk about at denotation level. When you're going to analyze this, this is a simple Barbie doll, and the signifier is the word Barbie, which is a word, which is a toy. And signified is that on the agreed cultural code, it's a toy, and basically it's something that reflects a toy from the Western world. It's called a Barbie doll. This is what the denotation level is. But then let's talk about connotation level. Now, Barbie as a connotative sign can have a completely different meaning. It can be, what does it reflect? If you look at the slimness of the doll, if you look at the perfection of the doll, it's a completely different ball game. Now, the perfect woman will be perfectly thin, with elegant limbs and flawless skin. She will possess beautiful clothing, jewelry, cars, jacuzzi, jet ski. So these are the things that you've seen in the Paris Fashion Week or something, but it reflects perfection. Perfect contemporary womanhood. Now, right from the beginning, these toys are setting standards for the upcoming kids to follow certain standards, having beautiful clothes, having a very good skin, having a beautiful slim body. So this means that this reflects a second level of connotation. Now, this is something deeper. When you're analyzing a simple toy, it just looks that you're analyzing a simple Barbie doll. But then, when you are going to a deeper connotative level, it's about elegant limbs, flawless skin, beautiful clothing, jewelry, cars. Now, it's perfect for the commercialized neoliberal world. And at the level of connotation, basically it just reinforces the values. For example, the kids growing up in consumer world can understand that clothes are important, jewelry is important, fashion is important, and these kind of toys can even set standards for them. So there's a lot of lots of things that you can look into toys as well. That's what the beauty of semiotics is. Now, at the level of connotation, the sign can tell the truth or lie, but it is connected to the wider social cultural framework and to our values, our beliefs, our social system. Now, this is what the sign and signifier does through connotation, that it's connected to our wider cultural social system frameworks, and it brings into play our beliefs and our system as well. So it's not just simply that's something you think about connotative level and you think that no, it has a lot of context to it. So you can look into consider these questions now, like how can we use semiotics. The question can be how can we analyze objects, images, photographs. For example, I gave you two examples. The first example was of how we can analyze a picture from the Paris March, a young boy who is saluting a French flag. What does it reflect? Does it simply reflect that this young African boy is welcoming French armies? Or does it reflect the colonial state mind of these enslaved or what you can colonial uh, African legacy? So these are the things that you can look into as a semiotician. And the second example was of Barbie doll. Although it may not always be the case, but Barbie is a commercially successful symbol as well. Anyone buying a toy, and particularly Barbie around the world, also reflects certain values. For example, Barbie will always have good clothes. Barbie will always have a big house. Barbie will have her own cars, own dresses. So this reflects, this promotes values as well in the younger generation. Consumer culture would be a better word, because it promotes consumerism, because any kid who's buying this doll would have in his mind that clothes are necessary, beautiful luxury is important. So basically what this simple toy does, that it promotes consumerism. And then, how can semiotics help us in understanding cultural text? For example, we always see text of films. What does the film mean? Does it promote racism? Or even you can talk about the objects. For example, if you see a statue somewhere or a painting, what does it mean? What does it reflect to? Does it reflect to a colonial past? For example, how do you see a Ranjit Singh's monument or a statue in Lahore or somewhere else? How would you look at that? How would you, what would be your explanation regarding to that? Or for example, the statue or monument of Ajab Khan Afridi in Dara, Adam Khail, how would you look into that? So these are basically an important ways to understand the cultural texts, to understand things surrounding us, to understand how uh, things are laden with culturally significant history. So another way of looking into this is it's also important to look into its role in visual and communication studies. It's very important. It can be a very useful tool for media representation, media text. Personally, there's been a lot of work in the last 20, 30 years in semiotics. Although these days we see a lot of trend towards critical discourse analysis or multimodal critical discourse analysis, or simply textual analysis in some other ways. But semiotics is a good way to get around these things. So let's summarize what we have discussed today. Basically, the purpose of this entire session was to give you an idea that how meaning is created and communicated. And basically, what semiotics does, it focuses on how meaning is created, how it is communicated. You basically dig out how signs and symbols create meanings. This is a very, very basic definition. That basically, what you do is how signs and symbols create meaning. This is what semiotics is all about. And then everyone is a semiotician, because everyone is constantly interpreting the meanings of signs around them, from traffic lights to colors to the shape of cars to the architecture to the designs of packaging. All these things create meanings. For example, uh, if you look at the colors, what does a different color mean? Colors can have an impact. You can wear bright luxury clothes in weddings, but you can't do the same towards a funeral. You just wear differently in funerals. What does it reflect to? Yes, it means that yes, colors have meanings, things have meanings. There are some cultural conventions that you need to follow, and it will give you good idea to become better researchers, to look into things with context. Now that's a key point. To look into things with context is important. Then, what we have seen, that it has developed into a bigger discipline, from anthropology and psychology. We can see its inquiries into cultural and society, and now we are seeing cultural productions in films and arts and literature. So the field of semiotics is expanding. It's not just limited to media or cultural studies. It can be used in anthropology, it is used in psychology, it's used in philosophy, it's used in sociology. So it is a wider application. And why I'm telling you to learn more about semiotics is because the future of research is interdisciplinary. You cannot just stick to one way of research, one particular methodology. You need to be versatile. You need to know the key discussions in other disciplines. You need to have a multidisciplinary approach, and that will give you depth, a lot of depth as a researcher. So this is what basically our discussion was all about: semiotics, general semiotics, what semiotics mean. Yesterday we discussed Ferdinand de Saussure's way, but today we focus more on Charles Sanders Peirce, how he talks about connotation, denotation. We also talked about Roland Barthes, who's a big name in semiotics. So this was our discussion, but the idea was to tell you that it's a particular field. It's a particular way of textual analysis which you can use as a researcher for media representation, media text, film studies, photographs. So it'll give you an idea that yes, we don't have to just go for quantitative studies all the time. We have to develop a much more better approach towards qualitative studies. That's the emphasis that I always emphasize my students to find out new ways. Because at the end of this study, at the end of this discussions, what we want that you to think, you to become a better thinkers, not replicate others. We want your opinion on things to come out as researchers, and that's the key. And this is what we are looking forward to. So I hope you enjoyed the session. If you have any questions, you can always email me. We can talk about it. We'll have discussions. I hope that we'll have some further very interesting dynamic sessions on this again somewhere. So let's look forward to that in the coming days. I hope you enjoy the session again. Thank you very much.